guys, and welcome back to another video. So, I have something to show you guys. I ended up kind of like rummaging around my old sketchbooks a little bit during the times when my relatives were around, and I was kind of like more confined to my room because I was not able to go into like my little office space, and I found this old watercolor journal. Now, the thing about this journal is that I had kind of like a preconceived notion that I had this more recently than I thought, but once I opened the front cover, I noticed that it's actually been 6 years since I've had this one, and I haven't used it since. Or I actually have. I haven't used it since probably 2-3 years ago, I believe. I have some that are like dated in here, but the time when I started this was back in 2019. So let me show you guys this watercolor journal, and at the very end I'm going to put like a full longer session of me working on the last few pages in this particular journal because I think it'll be kind of fun to work on it together. And recently, because it's like more of the holiday season, I'm wanting to do a little bit more of the longer formatted videos, and I have snippets of footage from when I was recording just on my phone because I did not have access to my filming setup. This is a Strathmore watercolor journal with cold press paper. It is a hardbound cover, but this is not my first time using this particular paper. This is the second time I've used this Strathmore journal, except for the first time when I had this type of journal, I had a soft bound cover, and I noticed that I didn't really like it as much with a soft cover, so I ended up getting this hardcover version instead. So my preference now is definitely hot press paper. I'm gonna actually show you guys the difference. Maybe I'll show you the difference at the very end, because cold press and hot press definitely has like a different look, and the way that watercolor lays on it is very different. So I'll show that maybe a little bit later. But on the front cover, we have mostly 17 stickers. So we have my Hoshi sticker, we have D8, we have D now. Then I have like some flower stickers. I have some of my Purikuda stickers I made of 17. I had some kind of like hollow vinyl and ended up using my sticker cutter to make kind of like a little title for everything. And this is just a paper like little sticker thing that came with the Paperlight screen protectors. So upon opening this particular journal, it's gonna be hard to see, but up here it says December 21st, and I finished this on the 27th of December of this year, which is 2025. So it has been 6 years since I've had this watercolor journal. On the front, I have a sticker. We have watercolor sketchbook number 4. I think before I would have like the tinier ones or just like some sort of smaller Strathmore type of watercolor journal with cold press paper, but they were much more tinier, probably A5 size-ish. So we have Jonghan, and we have, I think this is Mingyu. And so just watercolor on non-watercolor paper at the very front. They have my OC Sato, which is kind of like a chibi version, a headshot, and I was trying to draw, I probably mean lavender, but this is kind of what my style looked like at the time. So this is in 2019. This is the cold press paper. I was a little bit more sparingly using it. So to kind of talk a little bit more about this journal, I didn't know this really at the time when buying watercolor journals, is the fact that the paper is going to differ from back to front depending on the brand, but this is actually the wrong side of the paper, so it's actually very smooth. I think I do a demonstration when I do our real-time painting, but this side is the textured side, which is the side that you're supposed to paint on because it actually has that cold press paper watercolor texture that you're meant to paint on for this particular book. So it has much more of a rough kind of surface and absorbs the watercolor properly. While on this side, it kind of lays more like water-based markers in a way. It doesn't absorb in the paper fully. It kind of sits and then pulls a little bit. So I'm pretty sure, I don't know if this is like entirely correct, but there's not really any sizing on this side. I don't know how watercolor paper is exactly made. If you put sizing into paper, is it like throughout, or if it's only on one side versus the other side? But this side just absorbs the watercolor very differently. So here we have 17 drawings, which is going to be a very big bulk of our sketchbook. So I have a little Christmas wonu because it's around Christmas time at the time I was painting this. We also have Jonghan, which I guess I took a bit of a break. So this one is on January 10th of 2020. This was probably around Christmas. We have a little bit of gouache. So this is probably when I had the Arrtx gouache, I believe. I don't know if I had my Himi gouache at this point, but this is also on the 10th of January 2020, and probably these ones as well. So we have Wonu, we have Seungwan, and we have D8. So I've enjoyed watercolor for like quite a while. So after that, we have a little study, and then I was planning for a D8 fashion zine, so I was trying to figure out what I wanted for the cover. So we have D8 right here, we have Kermit, and I tried to put like the symbols of how D8 had decorated his Kermit little plushy doll, whatever he was carrying around at the time, and then some flowers. Once again, this is like the wrong side of the paper. And then we're back to the rough side, so we have Maseki, which kind of like during the time when I drew Maseki more as like little chibis, and I drew them with like very large flowers, so I was probably just practicing for that. At the time also, I got a new watercolor pan set, kind of from an artist I really like, and their name is Pearl Gray, and they have these really beautiful, kind of like iridescent colored watercolor paints. So these ones are really, really pretty. This one's probably my favorite because it's kind of more of like a bluish purple, but as you dilute it, it's more of like a pink purple. Then on this side, we have Ignat. So that was probably the time when I was really into Fire Emblem Three Houses, and Ignat's is one of my favorites. Then we have Wonu, which I was planning for a digital drawing, which I don't really remember if I ended up finishing this one for a digital piece. Moving along, we have Wonu and Jonghan. So these two are like my biases technically in 17. I do like OT13 just in general, but Wonu is kind of like my ultimate bias, and he's kind of like my bias wrecker technically. So Wonu, Jonghan, you can kind of see that my stylization was very off at the time. After that, more Wonu. So which Wonu, and then one from a fan signing, I believe, or a going 17 probably. Same with this one. And D8 for another, probably a fashion zine drawing. And then this one I think was supposed to be Sujong from Lovelies. I think that's her. I didn't really draw her very recognizable at all, so I can't really tell. But I do like the color palette. It's very pretty. After that, very pink and blue kind of spread. So we have a human version of Bonbongi, and then Animal Crossing version of June. And then here was like a draw this in my style. I forget the artist who I was doing this for, but I'm kind of glad I didn't end up finishing it because I can imagine that I would have got frustrated because I was working on the other side of the paper, even though I do like how some of these washes came out. After that, we have these ones. We have Hoshi, we have Dino. So this is during left and right era. I don't know if I have a date. Oh yes, 2020, and this is in the summer, so June 22nd of 2020. Then we have some chibis, which I did for an Instagram live stream, I believe, at the time. So we have Jonghan, I think this is Jonghan, Woozy. I still like this one, it's kind of cute. And I just like the general folds for this. Then moving on to Lovelies. Now, I think at this point I realized that I didn't really like working that much on this side of the paper, so I ended up doing some more line work instead. So I used some sort of fine liner, ended up smudging GA's face, and then I think this one's supposed to be Baby Soul from Lovelies. Then we have Wonu. I forget what the pilot ones were for 17, and then these ones were for the Carrot Land, I believe, where he has like a very cute outfit, and they had like these very large, almost like toast bread looking paws, and they're like passing balls to each other or like slapping them. I forget what they were doing, but it was really cute. This was another Draw This in Your Style, and this one's for Gloomy Home, I believe, which is another artist that I really, really like. And I wanted to play around a little bit more with the lighting. I actually don't mind the lighting for this. I just don't like the stylization of the character because their OC is very, 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 very pretty. But I still think this came out kind of cute. And I ended up doing a little bit of dry brushing to kind of give a little bit of glow to our constellation, as well as like some of the little sparkles or stars in the sky. So this is in September, I guess, of 2020. Yes. Okay, so we have Wanu and we have Vernon, I'm gonna guess this might be. So yeah, just more watercolor, realizing I don't really like the paper, so doing more of inking on this one, and then ended up doing watercolor for the line art for this one. We have more 17, I think. So we have Wanu, Wanu, and Wanu, and then right here we have Jonghan, which I ended up not painting or finishing here. I do like the washes for a lot of the hair though. I can tell that I liked bleeding in some of the different colors into if I wanted to do more of like a neutral base tone. Then I started doing some sort of painting of Venti. Ended up not finishing it. I think it's because I didn't like his face. And like even now, I don't like it. So I can kind of understand why I didn't finish it. Whoops. They're on the wrong side of the paper once again. So even more Venti. I think this might have been around the time when I first drew Venti here and here when I started playing Genshin Impact. So Venti was the reason why I got into playing Genshin, because I loved his character design so much that I decided to play the game. And then I really liked Barbara as well. I think I did this for a Keep Me Company video a long time ago, where I would like paint in the middle of the night and kind of do ASMR-esque kind of style. But watercolor doesn't like produce a lot of sound other than like me rinsing out my brush. So here's Barbara. Then we have Sucrose, which I did not finish. I would love to repaint her, to be honest, because every time I've painted her traditionally, I hated it. I think I can do her justice now. Then we have Kaya. Guess I didn't really like this one because it says, no thanks. Testing out some of the other colors here, like the pearlescent ones. And then using a fine liner, I'm assuming, to do some of the line work. So these ones are of Kaya. We have Wanderer. So this is still in 2020, so we're in November. Then we have Child or Tartaglia. Kind of the wrong side of the paper once again, so it's a very different kind of look. Still kind of cool though. With the sketchier lines. Then we have Wanderer playing around with gouache, and I can tell that I got frustrated once again. So this is when I got the Himi gouache, so this is kind of interesting. Did my swatches here, and you can kind of tell even from the swatches, I didn't really understand how to use the consistency of gouache. So probably fairly thick application here. It's not too bad. I could try finishing it up, but maybe I don't trust myself. But then testing out more watercolors with Masaki and Koji. So these two are my OCs. Then we have Yao Yao. So a little full body of her, a few sketches. Attempting to do it with gouache, probably got too intimidated and stopped, and then ended up doing a painting. I actually still like this one. I think it's because of how graphic the lines are and they look very dark. Almost like it was done with ink rather than watercolors. So I still like this one quite a bit, and it was still for another like Keep Me Company type of video. After that we have Hu Tao. You can kind of see like the difference in painting though, the application. Definitely didn't go as dark. I think painting on cold press paper definitely has a different feel. I'll do a comparison probably at the end to show you guys what I do with hot press paper versus cold press. Then we have Wanu, we have Jonghan, we have Wanu again. So this is from a Going 17. And then these two are probably from Carrotland or a concert, probably. I feel like it's Carrotland, maybe. So we're in 2021. The timing of it, so 0308, so it'll be March 8th. This is probably Carrotland. Jean, which I ended up covering the face of. Pretty sure I glued it down, so I'm not gonna reveal it, but it probably went through different iterations. So probably started off with watercolors, went with gouache, didn't like it, tried to fix it kind of like with a fine liner or a pen of some sort, didn't like it, so I covered it. Klee, kind of the same treatment as Yao Yao and Barbara and Tartaglia, where I did a Keep Me Company video, a painting kind of like the opposite side of the page once again. This one's kind of cute though. I don't mind it. So this was a redraw, I believe, of a watercolor piece I did in a different sketchbook. So this is of June, and I think it was for, ooh, I don't know what song. I was gonna say Light a Flame, but I don't think that's correct. I don't really remember what the context of this was, but I like the colors. I do like the colors. Then we have Sayu from Genshin Impact once again. Then with another kind of keep me company video. So ended up doing Xiangling and Guoba. I still kind of like this. I wish I finished it more to the degree that I did for Yao Yao, because I actually like the color payoff. Then we're on to the pages that I ended up filling in, I think this year, more specifically in the last 2 weeks. So Nouvellette, I was kind of like trying to get a feel for the paper. I realized, yeah, I really don't like painting on the back side of this, but it is like somewhat manageable. So ended up drawing just Nouvellette really quickly. And this one I will have like footage of, and same with like a majority of the drawings in here as well. So the exception is these two Wonus, I'm assuming, unless this is supposed to be Mingyu, but the shape of the mouth makes me think it's Wonu. Same with the eyelid. So Wonu, and this is probably during anyone. So this is more recent, definitely. Yeah. But back to more current day. This is probably still in like whenever anyone came out. Don't really remember. Maybe I'll put it on the screen. It was probably during that time, because I'm assuming this is like his race car racing outfit. So after that, I ended up painting these on one of the days that my relatives were over. So I was kind of like painting in the dark. So apologies for shaky footage, but also like very close up, very dingy lighting. Maybe I edited in post so that it doesn't look too bad. So I ended up painting more of your guys' suggestions. So I tried to pull some of the suggestions from the drawing your character suggestion post that I posted on my community. So here we have Kaveh, and then we have Kinich. Don't like this one. His eyes are just way too large, and his face just feels very tiny in comparison with his eyes. But I did have a lot of fun painting Kaveh. I think he actually turned out really pretty. So kind of the difference between, what's a good example? I guess Hu Tao maybe? How I used to paint versus like how now I paint. I think it's a little bit more delicate in a way. My line control is definitely better. And then I don't have footage of these two, so I ended up painting Selwyn. So we have Kaisen as well. So Selwyn ended up doing is the sketch with the Uni NanoDia Color Nano whatever, the assortment of the name, I'll put on the screen. And then painted with watercolors, inked it with the Energel Klena for the lines, because it kind of gives it a little bit of a cleaner look. And then for Kaisen, same premise as this one, except for I ended up going back in with a little bit of the Languo Acrylic Gel pens, as well as some colored pencils to bring more color to the page, because it is a bit harder. I should have talked about this as well. Another reason why it's hard to work on this side of the paper is because the paint doesn't absorb well into the surface of the paper, to the point where if you add too many layers and they're much more wet, thinner layers, you're basically reactivating what's underneath. So sometimes it's hard for me to layer up colors in a way that allows me to get like a nice, rich, flat area without reactivating some of the other areas. So I ended up resorting to just doing one larger kind of like wash, and while it's still wet, I try to concentrate as much of the colors as I can, which kind of gives us this really cool blooming texture everywhere, which that's why I kind of liked adding the darker lines with the black ink and then pulling out some highlights with the gel pen. I think this one actually looks kind of nice. So Kaisen and then Selwyn, both of them are my OCs. So more Genshin painting character requests from the character suggestion post. So we have Aether and Lumine, which both of these I actually really like. I might redo a painting of Wanderer at some point. I just don't like his face. I don't know. There's something I just don't like about it. Then we have Venti at the bottom, which I think he came out pretty cute. I do like the lighting. It's a little bit more dramatic in a way. So we have Venti, which compared to my old painting of him is kind of you know, the struggle here versus here. I hope there's an improvement. But I will have footage of these at the end of the video as well. And then to end it off, I told myself that I would paint Wonu as kind of like the ending page. I know it doesn't really look like him because I was following a very specific reference that I wanted to use. So I was trying to make his eyes look a little bit more smiley, but it just doesn't really look like him, and his shape of his nose is incorrect. But at this point, this is for me, so whatever. But I kind of did mixed media similarly. So did the sketch in red colored lead, ended up doing a wash or two of some colors, which became very faint. Then after that, I went ahead, added some inking with some of my calligraphy pens. So instead of using the Energel Clenna, I wanted something that could get more of like brush strokes. So I kind of went with that kind of look, and then switched over to pencil crayons to do a little bit more of like rendering and shading, so he wasn't so flat looking. But I think I kind of like this look. It's like graphic in a way that I really like, but yet soft. So we ended off on a good note, I guess. At least for me, I like it. I know it doesn't really look like Wonu, like his features are just off, but you know, it's okay. It's been a while since I've drawn anything like in a stylized portrait wise, so here's Wonu. And that's it. Ended up not doing anything for the back side versus what I did on the front side. So I think that's it for the tour portion of today's video. Today is going to be a longer session for Monday because I want to show you guys as much of the painting portion of what I ended up doing for the little Genshin character requests. And at some point, if you guys want me to do more watercolor videos of specific characters from like any fandom, just let me know. I'll be down to do more portrait painting of characters and just getting back into watercolors again. So before we actually jump into the watercolor painting session, which I did mostly in real time, so it'll be much more of a rambly video once again, let me show you a comparison of cold press and hot press paper, at least like how I like to approach it. And I might compare it to some of my old ones, but even like my recent ones, there is like a bit of a difference. So I don't think I have any Genshin ones on hot press paper, not exactly. So I have two versions of hot press paper. One's the Baohong type of paper, which is this really large one of Cellulin, and then this smaller version on the white is the Paul Rubens. So if you maybe I'll zoom in so you can kind of see the texture of the paper. But in terms of like style wise and like brush control, I was a little bit more confident with adding more deeper colors in this way and getting finer details. This one's not too bad, and they're actually like fairly similar in a sense. But let me zoom in for you guys. You can kind of see the texture. How close are we? Okay. So this is what Kaveh looks like, and to be honest, I do like the initial washes and being able to kind of like load up on different layers for the watercolor with cold press paper, and I feel like it takes in a lot of those wet washes really nicely. But I do like working with hot press paper because I can kind of get finer details, especially for my lines. Is there a way to show this side by side? It's a little difficult. Can you tell the difference? I don't really know. So it does have a texture to it. I'm not sure if there's a way for me to show you, so maybe I'll put like an image of something I find on Google that'll show you the difference between cold press and hot press. I don't know if you can hear the difference, but I do like working a little bit more delicately with my washes and stuff with hot press paper versus cold press. And I just like the way that I can kind of get a little bit more control versus, I know it's a little bit easier with cold press paper, I feel like, to get something that's a little bit more smooth looking. I don't know if it's because of the texture or the way that the paint sits on the paper versus on cold press paper. Sometimes it's hard to get very smooth areas. It becomes like slightly patchy in a way, which sometimes I take advantage of. I like the crisp edges on some of these compared to like some of these areas, I guess. It just feels very textured, and maybe that's my preference, I guess. I like something very smooth looking versus something super textured like these ones. And then on the back side of the paper, you can kind of see the blooming on this one of Kaisen. Kind of the texture here as well. But But it just feels like just a bit rougher for me to do line work, but I can still get like fair amount of like smaller details. So I don't mind too much. And then here's kind of like the close-up of colored pencils on the side of the paper. But this is the smooth side, so I can't really vouch for the texture here. Where did I leave my binder clips? So I don't know where like my usual extra binder clips are. I forgot to use or like forgot to bring some of these even on my normal sketchbook while I was not in this room. I don't really like going in and out of a room if someone's going to be occupying it as a guest. Like it's literally they're going to be in a guest room. So because of that, I left a lot of my supplies. And luckily, I was able to snag away my watercolor set because I had an inkling that I wanted to do some sort of painting. Not in this particular journal, but like in my actual sketchbook. So this is the Paul Rubens watercolor set, which is what I'm going to be using for majority of the painting today. I also found, I don't really remember when I got this tin, but I have like old, whoops, watercolor little pan palettes. So these are the half pan colors. So I have some of the primary colors up here and then whatever loose ones I put in the center. So these are like handmade watercolors, which I really like. And the color selection is so pretty. You would have saw it earlier when I was showing you guys the swatches here. And maybe you'll be able to see the shimmer in it. I'll zoom in for you guys. So this is from Pearl Grey. And it has these really pretty shimmers, which I don't think my camera's doing justice. But what I really like about especially these two colors is that the undertone and kind of like the top layer of the watercolor is different. So we kind of have a more bluish purple here. And then as we dilute it and get a little bit out of like not as much shimmer on top anymore, it kind of gets a little bit more like a pink purple. It looks a lot more blue in my camera. And then we have this one, which kind of turns into a gray when really diluted. And then up close, it's more of like a nice violet purple color, which I think is really pretty. I want to see if I can incorporate these in some way. Yeah, so let's get started with some sketching though in the meantime. I'm gonna be so honest. I took way too long of a break to go do something else, and now we probably won't have enough time to finish the entirety of this watercolor sketchbook today, which is not the worst thing. But let's still do a warm-up since I didn't draw today. And we're gonna be drawing Nouvelette. Also, I have a Selwyn photo card right here that I've been using to help focus my camera. So hopefully this should be okay. But for our warm-up, I also need to lower the music. Sometimes I feel like I can't think. This is why I don't do like as many talking videos anymore, but I'm trying to get back into it because I need to listen to more music and less like video content while I draw. It does something to my brain. But we're going to be drawing Nouvelette since it's been his birthday more recently, and he's one of my favorite characters. And I apologize. I've been sick for the last few days as well. Whoops. So I apologize if you can hear me sniffling and or sneezing every so often. I'm gonna try my best to make sure that it's always not audible. Kind of want to do a bigger one so that we can get as much as we can into this one piece. I know I've already drawn Nouvelette in the digital sketch page version that I did recently of drawing your guys' like suggested characters. I don't want to make it too similar, but I kind of want to make him crying. Is that kind of weird? It's like Hydro Dragon Don't Cry, but I feel like he would cry in a very pretty way, you know, in a sense, if that's even a thing. Sometimes I commit their design so like hard into my memory that I don't need a reference to look at too much, but I don't know if I've drawn Nouvelette enough for me to remember entirely, especially because like I haven't drawn him all that much like recently other than his face. We're gonna lighten the sketch a little bit. So luckily this particular pencil, I'm using the Uni NanoDia color Uni NanoDia. I forget, I keep forgetting like the combination of words. But it's not water soluble per se compared to like the Pilot Color Eno. And because of that, I don't really have to worry about it randomly dissolving on me. So I might leave in some of this blue. Catch them tears. Just I didn't really think about how I wanted to pose the fingers here or the hands in general. Quickly grab a kneaded eraser. I don't know what pose for the hand that I just give for him. It doesn't really make sense. I feel like I want him to be more like delicate looking. It looks a little awkward, but a really broken, jointed hand. I'm excited to paint though. I say this like almost every time I get to work with like watercolors. Gouache is like a whole entire different uphill battle for me. Quickly throw in these cute pointy ears and then hair. I think though like Zhongli and Neuvillette are characters that I really like in Genshin. But one reason I don't draw them as much is because they're very like handsome, ikemen type of character. And I feel like I can never do them justice, so I don't draw them for videos too often. But I really do like their designs and just like their character in general. So and then we can actually get everything set up. I do have like my sketchbook on a slant. I forgot if I like talked about this before I took like a really long break, but I have it on the laptop stand so that we can have it at a better angle, but it might cause my watercolor to trickle downwards and might affect the way that it's drying, but I kind of prefer it right now, especially like when I'm sketching out the characters and doing some detailing and stuff. I don't really have to worry about too much warping when the sketchbook is laying completely flat on my desk. But let me change the angle so you guys can see a little bit better. And I can get my setup kind of arranged on my desk a little bit more easy. I just realized I did the stupid thing of how much did I record? Wait a second. I feel so dumb. Okay, let me check. I was doing all this rambling. No! While painting. Oh, that's fun. Oh no. So I went on a whole thing talking about not being able to see until I get further along with like adding the skin tone, but now like you guys can see, so it kind of defeats the purpose. So I started to layer up the paint slowly, and it's a little bit patchier because we're on the smooth side of this watercolor paper. And it's a little bit different how I typically work because I like things to be very smooth. So I'm not going to repeat everything I said since it was just more rambly, rambly stuff. But we're working on his eyes right now. I've been doing this more recently. I don't know if it's like I'm not putting enough pressure when I'm pressing the start recording button. But oftentimes, like, I pause the recording or end the recording instead of starting a new one. So I'm like in a very much like opposite thing. So like if I start a recording and I don't stop it, then it's gonna continue recording. But then when I think I'm starting a new recording, I'm ending it, so then nothing gets recorded. But I've been laying down, there's like a little bit of like a yellowy base already around his face. I don't really mind if some of that bleeds in. I also have the lighting probably coming from this way. Oh, I'm so disappointed. So now I don't know what I talked about already, what I haven't talked about. So song-wise, I'm listening to Smile Flower by 17. Maybe I mentioned it, but sometimes in the colder months or months that don't have a lot of sunlight, natural light peering through, and this is usually in the colder months for me, at least like where I live, the days are really short. And because of that, I'm in a very like slow song, emotional song type of mood. So I listen to a lot of ballads, which is kind of why I'm listening to 17 Smile Flower. I also kind of got hit by another wave of nostalgia. So I've been listening to Lovelies again because they recently came back to do a performance at like one of the year-end shows, I think. I was also talking about how I'm not like 100% used to using this palette because a lot of the ones are like very concentrated with a lot of pigment, and I feel like the colors are very dark. So I don't remember which blues I've been mixing with what reds. So I haven't been getting like the most cleanest of purple colors that I would like to use. Can't forget his little winged eyeliner. Mix a purpley neutral color here, and we're kind of cleaning up our palette as we go because I don't really like wasting paint, so I often don't clean my palette completely unless I truly ran out of like room. I will either clean like a well or two, but it doesn't happen too often. I think it's because I paint very similar subject matters that it requires typically me to use up some amount of the paint that I already have in my palette. They kind of get this like better angled view, or at least I'm hoping it's a little bit better. I did end up swapping my mic and my camera. So my mic is no longer like in front of me, so I might sound a little bit more quiet. Try my best to push the contrast in some areas for his hair, because I might have went a little bit too dark. Because I know a lot of people who want like those really smooth gradations, so you have to keep like your bead of water or where your water is kind of like sitting at on your page always wet, and then having it at an angle really helps with that, so everything pulls to the bottom, and then you can kind of get a really nice smooth gradient as you connect like your next color, or you're transitioning it from a pigmented color to white. Kind of get a little bit more control that way, but that's kind of the reason why it's pooling like this. Otherwise, if you're working just completely flat, it might just pool like on the edges if you pool too much water in the center or wherever the last you left your brush. But this piece will be like fairly rough looking, especially until I get to do the line art, which I still do with the watercolors. We'll probably switch brushes so I can have a little bit more control. Oops, put my hand right into the paint. Add a little bit of like a yellow so that we can do... Ah! Nothing's drying as fast as I think it would be. Just like how it's gonna dry. But, you know, I don't really mind too much. because we can really spruce it up once we do line art, or like really add our darker, thicker kind of paint, I guess. So using less water so we can push that contrast a lot. I am painting Nuvolette though, so like other than his gloves, everything is like fairly light. Try to mix up a black right here. So got a purple. I'm gonna get a brown. Over to red, so we can add a green. Because Nuvolette has more of like a blue color palette, I'm gonna lean our dark color more towards blue. I was hoping that this is gonna be like a full session. I'm still like thinking about how I screwed that up. It wasn't recording. At least we got the sketch in there. And it wasn't like the entire line arting phase, I guess. Because you can still get smooth washes, but not as smooth as it can be. And I think I talked about this. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm still confused. But I hope you guys don't mind. I might try to make more real-time rambling videos like this, where it's more like we're just hanging out, creating and drawing something. Just for the holiday season especially. Because I know like holidays is like one time that a lot of people tend to spend with like their friends, their family, their close ones. Or maybe you want to keep it a little bit more low-key like I do. So I spend a lot more like, I guess, immediate family. Other than that, I don't do too much during the winter holidays. But I know, like, other people's situations, you might also be a little bit more isolated as well during this time. Oh, and I also talked about this a little bit. So if I'm, like, feathering out colors, trying to make them a little bit more softer, or fade them out, then I will always clean off my brush and wet the area and try to drag the pigment, and then wipe my brush down, pick up like a new, what is it called? Like a clean brush again, and kind of like go back and forth. It's the same kind of thing like with lifting. With a dry, clean brush, you can always pick up wet watercolor like this and like really clean out the area a little bit more. And then you clean your brush again, dab off the excess, and you can go back and do the same thing. You can really lift it. My brain like went into a panic mode. I went to send like a what do you want to call it? Like physical mail to some art mutual that I had. And I painted their OC for them on like one of my watercolor postcards that I had, because it's like a really nice size. But for some reason my brain's like, you didn't send it! You sent the mail, but you didn't send the watercolor piece in it. I'm pretty sure I did. Pretty sure I did. It's not like, it's nowhere near my desk at this point, so if it's not within like my immediate vicinity, I probably sent it. Because otherwise it'll be just like chilling on my desk. But they have such a cute character. I don't know when this video comes out, nor do like, I don't know if they watch my stuff, but if Steffi, if you're watching, your OC Enzo is very cute, and I'm always kind of shocked that we have kind of like similar tasting characters, which I find very, very funny. Yeah, he's gonna need a lot of help. He's looking a little rough. I'm kind of glad I picked a character that's like on the lighter side in terms of color palette. Like his hair is very bright and white, because I would have been frustrated trying to getting. Why can't I speak? I think it's the headphones. Maybe I'll switch to normal earbuds instead of like my headphones. I feel like I can't hear myself and I'm messing up and like combining my words in my brain. There we go. I think I can hear myself better now. What are we talking about? Oh, I would have been frustrated trying to get a very dark, rich color, but also trying to keep it smooth, because that's like my personal preference when it comes to like coloring or working with any medium, I guess. I can kind of rely on trying my best to get as clean of line art as I can to kind of fake the illusion that it looks a little bit more polished than it actually is. But like I said, it's kind of like my personal preference. I know like a lot of people who prefer something a little bit more with texture, or you kind of like the sketchiness or something like that, which is not a problem. Just my personal preference. I like things to be not splotchy and patchy. And the glare is pretty bad for you guys right now. I can technically see, but until this dries, you guys really can't see that much. I guess that's a trade-off. Either I can see or you can see. But if you guys are watching this like during the holiday season, which I'm sure this is when it's going to be uploaded. But granted, I'm pretty sure people have plans and are a little bit busy. But if you're not and you're kind of like chilling like me, what is your kind of like holiday tradition or your December plans, I guess? Because like I said, I don't think everyone celebrates Christmas around this time or like a holiday at this time, so it doesn't have to be entirely holiday themed. So the funny thing is, like, even though this watercolor journal, I do try my best to paint on both sides of the paper because I just don't want to waste it, and if it's like any type of practice for watercolors, I'll just take it. So even though that's the case, the Paul Rubens one and I think the Bao Hong is kind of like the same thing. So they're watercolor blocks. So I typically only paint on one side and I don't really paint on the other side because I would just have to tape it down. And I haven't been really taping down any of my papers like as of recently, other than like the postcard sized watercolor pieces. But I'm pretty sure those ones are double-sided, so I technically could paint very comfortably on both sides without problem. And I'm kind of interested to see if there is a watercolor journal. Oh, I think actually I have one. I was sent one, I think, but it was kind of like on a smaller side. But I'm thinking, do I want to get one that's like a little bit bigger so I can do more either larger pieces or like many tiny smaller doodles? I feel less compelled to do that on a watercolor block. I try my best to do more like either finished illustrations or like one-offs on those type of paper. But watercolor journal just feels a little bit less like pressure. But I also shouldn't buy more paper. I have plenty of paper, so maybe the next time I finish off my Paul Rubens watercolor block, I will consider getting a journal instead. I would doodle so many 17 drawings in like a tiny little travel-sized watercolor journal, and then ink it while I'm out and about, and then as soon as I get home, I will try my best to go ahead and paint it. And this is like back when I used to have the koi, Sakura koi, I think, watercolor palette, and it's like itty bitty. It's like really small, and it has like a little sponge for you to dab off your extra paint, or you want to dry your brush, and it had a nice like little painting well, and it's like all compact and very cute. I might have to go grab it. I'm pretty sure it's like in a giant tote somewhere, so I should try to find that so I can show you guys. And maybe we can use it for like a video, because that was like a very affordable watercolor set that I really liked. I just don't really remember if it behaved the way that it should for maybe more of like a student grade, because I think it is a student grade watercolor set. So okay, I'm gonna try to make a very dark color. So we're gonna try our best to really concentrate the pigments, which luckily this Paul Rubens set is very pigmented, so it's not really too difficult to do that. I don't know when I'll see my friends this month, because a lot of them have family plans, but I can't wait to give them their gifts. I've had like my friend's birthday gift for like since the summer, if not early spring. I think it's the summer, because it was during Odafest that I kind of like figured out what I could get her from an artist that I know that she really likes, so I hope it is something that she potentially wanted. Because the funny thing is, like, my friend even told me, because I was a little bit worried every time I buy artwork or art books, prints, or anything that's like from an artist that she really likes, I am scared that she's already bought it, but she's reassured me that she almost never buys those types of stuff for herself. So other than like at a convention, so I most likely am safe to think she doesn't have this one yet. I don't know if I'm considered like a good gift giver per se, but I do think about it like a lot. So I try my best like very early on to plan like gifts that I think my friends would like, either for their birthday or for a Christmas gift. But like as the years roll by, because I've known both of these friends, one for like, it's like around 7th grade. I've met one of my friends and we've been friends ever since. So that would have been 16 years that I've known this this girl. And then the other one I've known for like 14, 15 years. It's been very hard to get them gifts nowadays, especially because like I think a lot of us are more practical people now since we're adulting. So I don't typically like to give them like those cutesy type of gifts as much anymore, or like trinket type of stuff, because I don't want to accidentally like clutter their house either. Or I think like art is kind of the exception though for me, for their gifts at least, or like for the one person. For friend B versus friend A, I guess. Friend A is a little bit harder for me to shop for, because she's very practical. You can see how like patchy it is to a certain extent. So I'll try to work a little bit on the gold pieces for his hair while we let these areas dry. And then I think we can actually jump into working on some sort of line art, because I don't think I'm going to push this one too much other than like pushing contrast with the liner, and then we can work on our next set of drawings, I think. Because we want this to be nice and pigmented, but also not too watery. Now, hopefully the angle isn't too bad while I try to do this. Because if it's too watery, you're gonna have no control and you won't be able to get like really thin lines. Also switched my music to listen to Lovely's Twinkle. I keep myself awake a little bit. I've been getting like really poor sleep. I don't know if it's because of having relatives over. I feel a little bit more restless. So even though I wanted to make sure that, you know, his lashes were more or less intact right here, so we can have a slightly more half-lidded look. We'll do the same thing, add a line like this. I might have to make the top part even darker. So I would actually grab a paper towel to dab this off, because you can kind of see I'm smudging around the purple a little bit. You can kind of see like you can get really thin hairline, kind of like esque line art if you're using very light pressure, like little tears. Mix up a dark blue. Yeah, this is a little too watery, so I'm going to try my best to add a little bit more paint to my mixture. You can also like dab off some of the excess water in your brush if that's causing it to be more watery. That, or just try my best to add more paint to the mixture so that we can get it to be as pigmented and less wet as possible. I think if like once you get used to it, you can also find like what pressure works for you. Because being able to just control the movement by moving your arm instead of like your wrist, I feel like you'll have a better sense of how you're laying your brush on your paper. And oftentimes, at least for me, I find the consistency of my lines are a little bit more even that way. Also, you don't have to like do line art with a brush like this, or even with watercolors. Like, you can definitely use ink or like pens. I think for the other paintings that I'm gonna be doing, because they're gonna be on the smaller side, hopefully, maybe, I'm gonna lay it flat. Because like also when I do line art, I do like to kind of like flip my book or my page or my canvas around a lot, because my natural curve of my hand goes this way, or no, this way. Even like right now when I'm doing the lines going in the opposite direction, you can see they're a little bit more messy. So I want to add a little bit of color to his eyebrow. We don't want like a skin tone eyebrow. Also might darken the glove. I feel like these two being darker and then the middle and the side one not being darker is kind of throwing me off. Because I haven't decided also if this video is going to be like purely uncut, or I'll like take my time to edit everything down so that it's a little bit more watchable despite how long it probably will be. As long as you don't make the highlight too large, you won't look too like doe-eyed. Come on. Let me add it to his tears here. Okay, I think this is what we're gonna do for a warm-up. Let's move on to the next set of drawings. I am kind of considering if I want to sketch them all off camera and then we'll come back and paint them all together just to keep the video a little bit on the shorter side. Maybe. We'll see. So it is the next day. So I'm going to show you guys what I ended up sketching for the 2 pages that have like the textured side of the watercolor paper. So we have Aether and we have Lumine, because they were both requested, as I haven't really drawn the Traveler, I don't think at all, other than like little chibis, and for like a illustration, I believe it was like for my phone stand that I had for like a while back. But then we have Wanderer, and then kind of cutting into his sketch is Venti, and I feel like that was the last portion of like the Genshin request. I do apologize that these ones won't be done like digitally, but I thought it'd be just nice to do a longer session for watercolors. So we are going to do a light sketch with just normal graphite. And the reason being is that I ended up using the Pilot Color Eno for the sketching portion for this. And I think I'm going to sketch and paint with my paper laying horizontally flat on the table. So we're going to change the angle for you guys after I finish doing a very light sketch. I'm mostly going to focus on like the face and just like the general bang or like fringe area for the hair, because these paintings are going to be like a little bit more on the looser side. They're not going to be like 100% finished. And then we still have like 3 pages technically to do. I thought I didn't have like any more obligations, so that I could take my time and actually just film and work on stuff. But I had one more thing. Run a little bit of errands before like the actual holiday starts. And then last but not least, another family dinner type of thing. So I should pull up reference of Aether just to make sure I have his hair correct. But yesterday I was actually watching some Lovely's variety shows. I'm getting very little sketching done because sometimes it requires me to actually read the subtitles because I'm interested in what they're saying. And man, Lovely's truly is like my favorite girl group. I miss them a lot. I'm even like thinking about if I want to redo like my very first YouTube video that is currently public and do that as a video, because it is fan art of Lovely's, which is like a K-pop girl group, but right now they're like not super active as a group, but they've been more active recently only because they had a performance for a music show. So I really do miss them. And if you guys don't know, Lovely's is the kind of like sister group to Infinite, and Infinite used to be my #1 K-pop group, because right now I think for the longest time, because I've been a fan of 17 since debut, I think they're the longest group that I basically had for like my ultimate group, I guess, ultimate group, whatever you want to call it. But Infinite was like that for like a long time until they started to really slow down in any activities. And then I think it started with military stuff, then a member left, and then suddenly the members started leaving like the company and all that, and promotions went really slow. But then they started making recent comebacks, and it's purely just for the fans, which makes me so happy that, you know, every so often they'll come back to do like a little concert or release like a single or like a mini album, and it's just for the fans. Because like the members themselves are like all busy doing their own things, like pursuing acting, singing, musicals, all that stuff. So I'm gonna try to do the sketching portion for all of these at once so that we can just focus on painting. And I'm trying to think, like, do I want to paint Lumine first? And then in turn, I will also paint Venti first, because I kind of want to lock in the graphite or the pigment from my pencil so that we're not constantly smudging it. Because I don't think I'm gonna really be smudging anywhere here, because I can paint her kind of freely with this open space. And then once she's kind of like more or less complete, then we can paint Aether, since most of the graphite or like the red lead won't be smudging around too much. You can see a little bit of like the red going on the side of my hand because I am working like from, you know, on top of the sketches. But let's go ahead and get set up again. So let's mix up our skin tone first. We're gonna make it like a lighter but more watery kind of wash. Our color here, and I'm mixing in as much of the red pigment as well because we're not gonna really need it. And I didn't really think about where I wanted our light source to be, but because I've already put the color down like this, maybe we'll make it from the top right. So we'll just really water it down to make sure that our mixture is quite light compared to the rest. And you can see that if I scrub a little bit with the water, the kind of like red lead of the Pilot Color Eno is kind of mixing into it and it's slowly dissolving. Let's try to keep in mind some areas that have her, I guess like the lighting source being a little bit stronger. Because Lumine's hair is like fairly light. But hopefully you can kind of tell how it behaves a little bit differently compared to how it was using the smooth side of the watercolor paper. But it might be a little bit more dry time compared to the other side. But it allows me to get a little bit more time for me to blend the colors if I need to, or feather them out. Get slightly darker as we go towards the chin area. You have to be careful because there's still wet areas here and they might bleed into one another. And here, I'm gonna mix in some of our purpley blue color here. Might have started off a little too dark for the base because her scarf is supposed to be white and blue. You can see it's like feathering because it's not fully dried. It's nothing like we can do a little bit of lifting that won't fix it. So once it dries more, we'll lift up the edges. Try to make a more watery wash here so that we can let some colors bleed in a more natural way. So I'm just going to add a light wash of this yellow. So her eyes are, I guess, like yellow to reddish brown. So we're gonna add yellow. I'm gonna leave a little bit of white near the bottom so that we can blend it out. Sometimes I do it the opposite way. So I would start with whatever the color is at the top and then slowly, gradually kind of fade the color into whatever the color is at the bottom. Kind of let it bleed into the yellow color. This makes it a little bit more unpredictable, but I don't really mind. And then I might add a little bit of like a light wash of blue at the very top. A little bit of reflective light. I also just think it looks a little bit brighter and shinier when I add like a different color at the very top of the eyes. Then we're gonna mix up our reddish brown so we can do kind of her lash lines. I apologize that you might not be able to hear me. Sometimes I'm turning left to look at my watercolor palette, but my mic is on my right side, so it might sound quieter while I'm mixing up paints. We should have added our light blue first. I love how like sharp this brush is, despite me having troubles using it the first few times, because it does have like a little curl to it. So one thing I didn't do is add shadows to her face to give it a little bit more depth, because these are very flat, especially like this area was missed. I could literally paint forever though. Like watercolor is especially so therapeutic for me. As long as like the illustration or the thing that I'm drawing is not something that needs to be used for later, so there's like not really that pressure for it to like come out super perfect. Because I mentioned earlier that I kind of just like the process of painting. It's gonna knock out the majority of our shadows here. This is why I like to do the line work typically at the very end, or try to complete things like step by step so that I'm not reactivating all of my lines again. It's not really noticeable like on camera as much as it is like if you actually see it. So I don't know if it makes that big of a deal. So we're getting close to the part where I'm just gonna focus on doing the line work. Some of my sketch lines are so confusing here. I don't know if it's because I couldn't decide whether or not I wanted to add her ear in or leave it out. Okay, we can darken it up. So I'm gonna mix a reddish brown and kind of like my dark blue to get a very dark, kind of muddier color. Almost resembling black. I'm just gonna add a little bit more contrast in her eyes. But I do like the contrast as well, which is why I like to add, if I can, a much more darker color. Because like, not for every eye style this would work for. Like I wouldn't really darken up the area near the highlight and then the really bottom portion of the pupil, like right here. Maybe a slightly rougher textured hot press paper. I might look it up real quick just to figure it out, because it does make blending of colors very easily. What was I saying? Very easy compared to like my hot press paper, where it's like super smooth to the point where I feel like the capability of being able to blend things and have it look a little bit more, not exactly seamless per se, but not as, how to explain this? Having areas that are not so obviously separate being kind of like blended together, where it dries with like a slightly harsher line in between the places that you want it to blend. Because sometimes I do go a little bit overboard with watercolors for the line arting phase. And I get rid of some of that like airiness that I do like. And I think that like being able to use watercolor in that way is sometimes very difficult. I treat this sometimes more like markers in a way. So it does look a little bit more graphic rather than as soft. Okay, I think that is it for Lumine. I want to use some of the pearlescent colors though. Pretty. Okay, so let's move on to Aether next. I am gonna let her dry just a smidge so I don't put my hand right into the wash that I just did. Okay, so as I was like letting Lumine dry fully, I was actually looking up when I bought this particular watercolor journal. So I bought it back in like December 19th, 2019. Is that when I started this? I started this 2 days after, but I found the exact same one and it is indeed cold press paper. So am I missing cold press paper now? I don't know. Maybe something about it that I must, that is a little bit different than what I'm doing on hot press paper. I don't know. This is my towel, by the way, if you're seeing it peep in the corner. But we're gonna do the same thing, except for lighting. I'm gonna try to decide this first. Maybe I won't do any specific lighting. Standard kind of like straight on kind of vibe here. Kind of similar to Lumine, I'm going to scrub at the paper a little bit and let the very light kind of initial wash of our skin tone. I'm going to take advantage and try to scrub away our red lines. Because there is a point where if the watercolor does dry, or like the water does dry without scrubbing away kind of like the red pigment, I believe it won't really budge after, but I'm not going to chance it. So I'm going to try my best to get rid of as much of the red lines as I can. And I highly recommend that if you don't want red to be like an undertone in your painting, take that into consideration, because I know it doesn't really show up on the camera right now, but there's a lot of like muddier pink right here. And it's due to the fact that I'm mixing in that lead color from earlier. I'm also gonna take this to kind of block out where we want our potential highlights for his hair to be. I think a part of me just forgot what kind of like cold press felt like for watercolor paper. I've used to use like the Canson watercolor paper, and I think that has like a rough texture, a very uniform kind of like rough texture that I used to use for like a lot of my 17 watercolor portraits back in the day. I'm wondering if that's what I was thinking. Maybe this one was smoother than that Canson version. That I thought this was maybe hot press paper. I'll see, because other than potentially getting cold press paper in the future, whenever I do run out of watercolor paper, because I don't want to overstock on art supplies right now. Other than that, I will test using hot press paper a little bit more to see if there is an issue that maybe I do miss using cold press paper more than I thought. A little bit more of a red to our blue to make it more of a purple. So the thing that sometimes I struggle with, especially with not having like a plan for the watercolor pieces, I do like making them have a little bit more of like a colorful undertone or adding colorful shadows, But if I do an overall yellow wash like I did right here, using purples, or I guess like maybe the wrong type of purple, it becomes very muddy rather than vibrant. So I do have to be careful of that. This might be a bit too much, so we can kind of lift up the pigment a bit. Same thing, kind of like the upper lip, lower lip shadow. Try to block in where we want the actual shadow for his chin and face to be. Kind of line up the color. We can do the shadows for his sclera. It's a little dark, but it's okay. I'm running out of areas to paint because majority of the areas that I can that requires a little bit more detail are still kind of wet. So I'm kind of like biding my time a little bit. Like I said, I want to be a little bit careful. So I don't want to lose all of my yellow areas, so should add this kind of sparingly. We'll intensify it with a little bit of red at the top and then a little bit of brown. I'll add more of the brown once we start doing the liner and kind of like the upper and lower lash line for his eyes. I feel like I made his very like warm. Sometimes I don't realize how quiet I get when I start to paint. Braid right here. So I'm using more of an intense looking yellow right now so that we can layer it on top of the kind of purple color we had earlier. Maybe I'll add a little bit more blue and purple. We'll see. I definitely added it more into Lumines and it became very green. But I think it overall fits with what I wanted. I still feel iffy about the purple here. I think it looked prettier without the purple. I don't even know if I drew the other eyebrow. Don't know if I like the blue, but it's okay. Like I said, usually, even if I use like intense colors like this and it might look a little bit off, once I add in the line work, hopefully it knocks it back enough because the line work will be much darker and have more contrast that these will look a little bit like less out of place. I guess like back in my uni days too, I mostly used cold press paper or like mixed media textured paper. I've also used like rice paper. I used drawing vellum for watercolors. I painted on many different mediums. Paper surfaces, I guess. A part of me was like also just taking advantage of what they had at our university art store. It was very cute though. I don't even know if it's considered the basement technically of an old art building technically. It's ran by I think 2 owners. Coincidentally, one of them was named Joanne, and I was always scared of her. She's very nice, but she got very annoyed at me because at the time, when I went to uni, I never really used like a debit card or credit card until then. And because of that, I did not know that my card had a limit of only $100 on it. So every time I went to buy we had like buy an art set or art kit for our art fundamentals, and it was at least $300, which really sucked, but it came with like the portfolio cases, it came with like a bunch of drawing supplies and a bunch of drawing paper to get you started. So technically necessary to a certain extent, but also expensive. And I didn't know about it, and this lady, she kept getting frustrated with me, being like, you keep coming back and you're not able to pay for it, all this. And then later on she felt bad because she saw that I was panicking. But luckily, like, my bank, there was a branch that was very close by, so I got it sorted out. I could buy my supplies. But it's like a hole in the wall almost, the art shop or art store that we had. So sometimes to get like new shipments of paper, and I would buy like one gigantic sheet because it was an okay price. So I tried to take advantage of just testing out paper to find which ones I liked. So I think I talked about stories like back when I was doing like etching, so you'd use like copper plates for it. I told my prof, despite me having so many issues with doing soft ground, which is using like a very soft medium on top of the copper, and then use like acid to eat away at the copper to reveal your drawing. But I loved that because it was very much like akin to what I like to work with in graphite. Like a lot of the classmates I guess I had could recognize that I typically like a softer style. So when I saw that I could do it for etching, because hard etching, hard ground, whatever you want to call it, it was okay. It was manageable, but I love being able to like softly put gradations and, you know, build up value. So when I was able to finally figure out how to do it, because a lot of my soft grounds failed, it always had like a bunch of noise in the background, either from poor polishing or not keeping my plate clean enough. So something probably got onto the surface and the acid would start eating away at anywhere that had like the imprinted areas of my soft ground. But if I had like too much debris and stuff for some reason on my plate, which my tech couldn't figure out what was my problem, he just said basically I'm cursed. And I was doing like tinier plates, I guess, like about this size, like maybe 8.5 by 11, so like an A4 sheet of paper ish. And then I got like one successful run at it. And my prof's like, oh, okay, you can like do any etching medium that you want to do for like the rest of your final projects for your final. Because this is when I was in 4th year. And I was in 500, so like you had your grad show coming up, you had your 400 level finals coming up. And then when I was like going through the process of explaining what I wanted to do for my final piece, my prof was very nervous because they're like, how big do you want to go? And I'm like, I want to go, I think it was like 32 by 32. If not, no, it was not a square. So 32 by 24 probably was the size of my copper plate in inches. And I remember carrying that bad boy from like the basement-ish area of this art building to the 3rd floor, I believe, of our art building. I remember not having gloves, and I almost kept dropping the copper plate and slicing open my hand. I got like little cuts, and luckily it wasn't like too bad. Otherwise, I don't know what would have happened. I don't want to think about it. Lithography was like my favorite, except for like polishing the rock. The stone. But I also liked that like lithography had a very soft style that you could do as well. Because not gonna lie, one of my favorite days whenever we had printmaking classes is demo day. It's always my favorite. Because you get to just hear the text talk about the medium in depth, and they just teach you how to use like the different machinery or the mediums, the acids, the chemicals. Because I want to do a little watercolor sketchbook tour for you guys at the very end of this, even though this video is going to be super duper long. There's one thing for sure I can say, especially for like doing watercolors, then versus now. I'm definitely more confident with my brushwork in terms of like inking or line work. I think I do have more control. Only because like I'm kind of curious on how thin the lines are, whether or not they're kind of like scraggly or are they very watered down. Okay, our boy Aether is pretty close to being done. I was gonna add some last minute little lines here and there, but similar to Lumine, I'm gonna leave some areas just completely open. So I feel like I made his eyes a little bit too narrow, maybe, in a way. So I'm gonna add a little bit. I might add a tiny smidge to Lumine. But here are, what do you call them? Traveler twins? Wow. So we have Lumine, which I think looks super pretty. We have Aether. I'm gonna give him the same treatment as equality. We're gonna pick a pearlescent color. I do want to incorporate these into an actual piece though, eventually. Just gonna try to naturally fade it out as much as I can, and then pick up a little bit more. Oh, I didn't really add any yellow there. Okay, Aether and Lumine. Finished. Don't know if I can show you guys a better angle of this without having to move my camera too much. So we have Aether. I do like Lumine's eye color a lot more because it has a little bit of that golden-ish color in between. This one's a little bit too red, so I kind of let the color run a little bit too further down. So when I had the yellow, so it's a little bit more red concentrated rather than like a yellowy color then transitioning into the red. But I think overall they look pretty. Maybe I'll try to lift the color in his eyes. But I'm gonna let it dry. I will add in the yellow at the very bottom again, but in the meantime, I'm going to prep to get ready to do Wanderer, and then we can actually start painting him as well. Okay, last two. I did end up putting some of the yellow back into his eyes. It's a little bit better. It's still like very orangey because hers is more of like a pure yellow towards the bottom, and then the white at the very bottom of her iris kind of helps make it a little bit lighter. His seems very orangey. I think it doesn't help because I didn't really color in his pupil. Helps a little bit more since there's like more contrast, but we are going to be painting Wanderer. My water, it's not super, well, okay, it doesn't help that the glass looks filthy, but it's not super opaque, so I could technically keep using it, but we're gonna, whoops, cap this off. And I have a second jar filled with water. Now, it would have been smart for me to use like a dirty water and a clean water, but I'm very lazy, so I'm just gonna swap to our clean new water and we can start painting Wanderer. But kind of same thing, we're gonna add in our yellow, and I'm gonna try to leave the center portion of where his nose is as a little highlight, because I don't think I'm gonna do any funky lighting for this one either. Venti, we can play around with the lighting a little bit more since there's also a lot more movement. We're just gonna kind of paint away, scribbling away once again the red areas. I'm kind of glad I used red. I do have like other colors. Pink would have been fine too, as long as I didn't use like blue or green. Even though green's good to neutralize like the skin tone, so probably would have been okay too, depending on your color palette, obviously. I've also realized I'm gonna lose his eyebrows while I'm working on this, so he's gonna look funky anyways. So I'm still trying to push around some of that red. I feel like on Wanderer, besides all these like little pilling areas, which I don't know where it's coming from, it's a little bit more easy to see where the red is kind of smudging with the rest of my paint. But that's kind of what I'm talking about. Like if you're very cautious about not wanting to have so much pink or red being in your piece, then you might want to lighten up your sketch a lot more before placing down your graphite. I lean a lot of my skin tones typically very warm, and then as we get to the shadows, I get it a little bit more cooler, leaning towards blues and purples depending on the lighting scheme and like the overall color palette of the character as well. This is kind of like the harsh line that I'm talking about, that I get a lot from hot press paper, but I feel like it's easier for me to kind of like swipe away with a clean brush to make it look more seamlessly blended. Versus on hot press paper, even like with clean water, I feel like sometimes it makes a little bit of a harsh outline. So other than putting down some of the shadows, ooh, what the heck is happening here? Because this is the inside of his palm. So we let that dry. I'm gonna try to get a kind of like brassy color. I don't know how to explain it. Almost like a gold. So that we can do some of the areas up here. And I want to add some of the lighter colors first, because we have a nice like darker navy, royal blue, ultramarine. I'm saying way too many different blue colors that don't even look the same, but it's like a dark blue at the very top. So dark colors are easier to layer on top of lighter colors, so we're gonna do our light colors like this, and then later on we can just use the dark color to color over top of our yellow, and hopefully it'll be dark enough and not too of a, how to explain it, a color that will make his hat look too green, I guess, if it were to actually mix. But I do like Wanderer. He's like a character I definitely wanted to pull for, and I luckily do have. Okay, let's see. Eye color, kind of like a purple and a very light blue in the center. So we'll pull back our favorite blue color here, which I use a lot in this palette. Let's not forget his red little, I guess, makeup. I don't remember the last time I've drawn Wanderer. Probably a very long time ago. Okay, next up his hair, which we're gonna mix up a kind of like a dark blackish purple. This is gonna be very dark right off the bat, but we're gonna test it. So I'm kind of doing the same thing I said before, so I'm gonna try my best to create almost like a band of shadow and or highlight. And I don't mind bringing this color all the way down. But for the rest, well, it's a little bit more blue than expected. I'm gonna kind of like wet his bangs a little bit here and there. And then we're gonna drag the pigment down and let it naturally kind of bleed into the water I just placed. I tried deliberately like shaking my camera, but I don't think it's causing that noise. So I can't tell. Maybe my mic's syncing. My setup has been like weird the last few weeks. I'm hoping it's not like something that happened to it and it's like glitching or the wires and stuff are malfunctioning. I guess it is me shaking the desk, so maybe it's okay. It's gonna look a little funky for a while. It definitely dried a lot more dull, so it's not too blue, which is kind of nice. And then we have our upper part, which I think I'll do at the very end. I really need to shut off my notifications. He's looking not too bad. I don't hate the hair, which is kind of nice. And I always love blocking in hair like this. It's kind of like just a flat area. You guys should let me know. I know this is gonna be very far into the video, so probably no one's gonna comment about this. But if you have tried watercolor, do you enjoy it? Or if you haven't, is it a medium that you want to try out in the future? Because I know watercolor itself, I think, is most accessible for a lot of people, but maybe the watercolor paper, I think I've heard from some people that getting decent watercolor paper is not very accessible. I truly love this medium, so I'm gonna be very biased towards it. And like I mentioned, like, you don't have to worry about replenishing your colors as often or having a super big selection of colors to get started with watercolors. You can definitely have like a very minimal palette or just have like the student grade ones, which have, let's say, either 12 or 24 colors in a smaller set, and they'll last you for quite a while. I do have one set of Koi watercolor tubes that I've ran through one set, I think, at some point, but I painted like a heck of a lot, and some paint was wasted due to the fact that when I put it into my little palettes that I had like really large palettes, and it had like, I don't even remember how many wells it had, but it was like plenty enough for the colors that I had and even more. But they would always like chip and fall and like break within the palette itself, and then I would either have to collect all its little debris and put it back into the well and use it all together, or I would chuck away like the pieces, and then eventually I would lose larger chunks of my paint, which really sucks. But for the most part, like, I got a lot of use out of it. So you can do the same thing, so build up darker colors right at the edge of where your highlight is, and then if you want to, take a clean brush again and like pull down the pigments lower and lower so that you can have a little bit more of a softer look. But I kind of want a harsher look to, one, separate some of our areas here, but also just his hair I want to be darker in general, so I'm gonna try my best to darken everything up. Also, all day I've been having like Epic the Musical. I think it's called God Games. It's the one that goes like, Father, God King, rarely do I ask for favors, now I'm knocking. It's that song. I have it stuck in my head for no reason. I'm only saying that it's stuck in my head still because even though I'm listening to Lovelyz right now, and I love their songs so much, that's still in my brain even though the song's playing and it's not God Games. I think it's okay. Let's mix up a purple. Oh my god, he looks so scary. So I'm just gonna place this down and then we're gonna dilute it. It's not as light as I would like it to be, so I'm just gonna grab a little bit of this pinky color, which didn't show up, so that kind of sucks. Once it dries and the hair dries, then we can do the line work. Am I holding my breath? A little bit. Line art still makes me nervous, even though, like I mentioned earlier, that I do definitely think I'm more confident in my brush control. Doesn't mean I can't screw up still, so having that linger in the back of my mind is always great. Always go silent. I think also it's like higher stakes for me when I do line art last like this, because if I put all this effort trying to put down the correct colors, be as clean as I can for like my final washes, just to screw it up on the line art, it kind of sucks, but I've done it before where I've kind of like screwed up the eyes or something at the very end. I should use like a lighter color for this. It's okay. I think he's looking a lot better now that, you know, other areas are also lined. Okay, one last area and then we can move on to Venti. And I will then decide whether or not I will maybe put the rest into time-lapse to fill out the rest of the other pages, or will I make this literally the longest video ever? I think the longest video is the 6-hour one with Sotheby, I think. The watercolor piece that I did. And make his eye makeup just a tad bit stronger. Some of it gets lost because of the line art that I ended up putting. There we go. Okay, so now we're on to Venti, which I will still pull up a reference for now, so I can be a little bit more color accurate. This is an awkward angle, can't really tell. But let's paint our last one for here, which is Venti. Let's make this side, I guess, where we're gonna have our light source. Wow, this is very yellow. And technically, if I want it to be more like everything is kind of being touched by the sunlight, I guess, in a way, then these shouldn't be white. Other than the highlights, I guess I'll leave completely white. Everywhere else, we're just gonna color and paint with our yellow. So you can do this with hot press paper too, but I mentioned earlier that I feel like the cold press paper is just a smidge more forgiving. I feel like I should have went the other way, some more intense color on the right. And then as we get closer to this yellowy area, we can kind of fade out our orangey yellow color. That, or we can just bleed it right back in. I feel like out of all the colors in this particular watercolor palette set, this turquoisey kind of like blue-green that I have in here, I use the most. But granted, I think if I run out of this particular color, because I do use it a heck of a lot, I have like a bunch of different brands of watercolor tubes, I guess, I've collected over the years, trying to find like a color very similar to this, or like one that's very close to this kind of color. So I definitely have some spares that I could use if I wanted to. I don't know if you guys can tell, he's not gonna dry flat. You see this? It's because this binder clip also isn't as like strong, so it probably warped while it was being clipped. Then again, I also clipped this a bit too late, so it probably already warped before then. I'll try to mix up a purple as well for this, or use our leftover purple, which looks almost brown at this point. Let's continue with the shadows on his face, or I guess like also just adding more warmth. In general. Let's drag the color downwards. Be a little bit too cool. Okay, I'm gonna add shadows to also his clothing, because he does have more of like a, both kind of like a manila-ish color, but also white. So we're gonna mix up a kind of like a bluish color to do a good portion of our shadows here. So his eyes are pretty bright, with that same kind of blue color I've been using throughout his hair. It's even more like greeny, if anything, but I don't really want to add green. Sometimes I add green to his eye color too early, and it's hard for me to get rid of that greeniness and bring it back to blue. Same with this area. We need to kind of blend it into the blue. Just try my best to grab some of this dark color to do some of the hair strands here. Okay, and then as we move across, why do I keep doing this to myself? Maybe I'll try my best to add as much of the dark color as we can right now as it dries, because I can't really paint as much of the left side as I would want to, because I once again have painted the right hand side first. Granted, I kind of wanted to because I knew it's the darker area, so it's a little bit easier for me to paint the darker area like this, and then we can slowly dilute the color for when we move left. Probably dilute it a bit more, but this color works before we end up using any sort of line work. And for Venti, or people who have like any blue or teal kind of eye color, I think even like green gets kind of this color as well. I kind of use pink or a very light purple or a peach color to do the very top. Kind of like how whenever I use kind of brown or yellowy kind of eye color, then I will try to use like blue or kind of like a lavender color on the top. Kind of like this. I think we can do Venti's eyes. I'm kind of scared that this isn't gonna fix it. I also forgot to add the pink. Every time I stop the recording, sometimes I go take a break to see what's going on. And I come back and forget what I was supposed to work on. So other than his nose being missing, I think he'll turn out okay. Just need to make sure there's enough water in my brush. So the reason why I also like these types of brushes is because they hold enough water, but also have like a very sharp tip to the brush. Because otherwise, when I use like, I forgot what they're called, detailing brushes? They're really super thin ones. They're great for like really tiny details, fine hairlines, all that kind of stuff. But I always found myself having to either reactivating the amount of paint that's on my brush because it didn't hold enough water or moisture, so lines would get very dried out and very like scraggly and kind of skips a lot because they're too dry on the paper. So I do like a brush that can at least hold a significant amount of water in it. Because even if it wasn't drying out per se because it doesn't hold enough water, you would have to keep re-dipping your brush because it also can't hold enough water and pigment together, so you're constantly like having to basically refill on paint every time. Okay, I'll add a little bit more to the right side It's just like the other ones, they're gonna be a little bit incomplete. I need to add some lines to his face, which I need to change our line art color to be like a reddish color. Also doing like line art on textured paper, so in this case cold pressed paper, I do find that using a more watery consistency isn't as like bad. Maybe it's because the way that it absorbs into the paper, but it's much more noticeable, at least in my opinion, when you have a very watery wet consistency for finer lines on hot press paper. You can really tell. I don't know if this is supposed to be hair or not. I guess it is. So maybe we'll darken it. I'm not gonna spend too much time trying to do the details on his hat, so I'm just gonna add a little bit of shadow here. Okay, so I think Venti is done. I'm not gonna bother. Oh, wow. Every time I do line art, this is what happens. I have like a drawing bump or like a callus here. But the watercolor I hold, or like my brush, whenever I do watercolor or anything like that, I hold it so closely to the tip of the barrel. So I guess the paint from the top of the brush leaks onto my little calloused finger. But I think that's it for this spread. Let's wait until Venti is like 100% dried. I'll zoom out for you guys to see the spread and the previous Nouvellette drawing. And I'm gonna see if I can do the other pages either in time lapse, or I'll show you guys right after I do the overview, because I don't know if I want to like record the entirety of it, but we'll see. Okay, I forgot that I should probably show you guys the close-ups first. So here's Aether. We have Lumine. And over here we have Wanderer. He does look a little bit funky. It's okay. And then down here we have Venti. Here's the overview. See, it does look a little funky. That's okay. I definitely think the twins turned out really cute though. So this is this entire spread finished, basically. So I still have this page to do, which I might doodle like off camera, and I'll come back and probably show you guys the actual overview of the entire sketchbook, because I also have one more page at the back. And then on this side, we also did our warm-up of Nouvellette. So I'll come back probably a bit later and hopefully have this page somewhat done. I don't know if I'm going to do like small doodles or if I'll do something large. If not, maybe I'll save this watercolor sketchbook tour for a different day. And I'll talk to you guys next time in a different video. We'll see if we end it here. But for now, I'll talk to you guys next time in another video. Bye!